So, all right, if you guys can mute yourselves just for acoustics, when you're welcome to ask questions as I go along. I'm an old high school science teacher, so I'm not asking you to hold questions till the end. You're welcome to unmute yourself and ask me, just like interrupt. That's totally cool. So just so you know, that's my ground rules. Is just you got a question, ask it. That's what I'm here for. So what you're seeing here is the cover of one of our 6 books that we've published. And we got hired by Menlo Spark back in 2018 to try to help Adobe make their new tower all electric. And since then, we've keep on putting them out. And these are supposed to be practical guides. So they have all sorts of pretty pictures and very simple, straightforward instructions. So they're written for us. They're not really written for engineers, although engineers would do well to read them because most engineers don't know how to do all electric construction. But they're not classic engineering texts. They're for planners, architects, activists. That's the goal. So the quick background. I'm a farm boy from Wisconsin. I live on a farm now. I left Wisconsin primarily because of like gay bashing. I'm queer and married with a wife and all that kind of stuff with kids, but I'm queer. And so growing up in Wisconsin, there's just lots of bloody fist fights, police, suspensions, you know, the joys of growing up queer in the Midwest in the 80s and 90s. So I came to California, went to Humboldt State University, now Cal Poly Humboldt, and at HSU, there's a 1978 era demonstration home, the last of the homes that was started by the Carter administration. When the Reagan administration started, he canceled all the funding for the demonstration homes nationwide, which were renewable energy demonstration homes. They weren't explicitly electrification, but that was implicitly, they're just get rid of fossil fuels, however to do it. And so there's pedal power and biodiesel and wind turbines and the rest. So that's why I started in 1995. I was a high school science teacher. And then for about 6 years, I worked developing affordable housing, and I started a new affordable housing company for my boss, but I did all the work. And that was just for zero net energy housing, because the USDA in 2007 was responding to federal legislation and put competitive scoring in 2007 for zero net energy, low-income senior, low-income family, and farm worker family housing. So that's what Danco Communities does to this day. And then from 2011, I've been a consultant. And you can see this is a cute little Danco Communities project with USDA money in Fort Bragg, these 26 low-income senior homes, adorable. Everyone gets like $200 back at the end of the year because senior citizens use less energy than average. And so the average over predicts for them. This is my house in the lower left-hand corner. This is my coolest project I'm working on. It's 500 units. It's on the DC Beltway in Washington, DC. It's in the county that has just voted to ban gas. And this is the first all-electric building, Montgomery County, just to the north, on the north side of DC. It's like a square. DC is a square. It's on the north angle point. It's got a 9-story tall PV wall. And all of this is cost effective. These are choices made by Housing Authority of limited money. And so the solar is being put in because it has a financial payoff, not for looks. So I wanted to lead you through sort of some national perspectives for a second. This is my favorite slide. This is from the Propane Education Research Council's 2016 Outlook report, in which they freaked out because in yellow here is what you're seeing is electricity gaining market share for the delivery of energy to water heaters and space heaters, and it's national. It started in 1993, but by 2016, it becomes such a thing where propane was losing sales all over the country that they mapped it out to say, where's propane still selling? And propane is in dark blue, natural gas, light blue, electricity is in yellow. You can see that electrification, which is driven by developers who build 95% of the buildings in our country on spec, not for clients. So it's just people building on spec saying all electric is cheaper to build. That is the only reason that all this is happening. It's not policy driven, no corporate initiatives, none of that. This is 100% market driven. Then another map, Sierra Club, thanks Carl. This is illustrating that even in
Sean,
mansions.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Sorry, could you go back to the last slide? Why is San Diego and Imperial County other
Other
market share gains?
I don't know.
And then
I'm
what
not
would that
clear.
other fuel be?
Aren't they natural gas?
No, natural gas is in light blue. Distillate, which is, diesel fuel, fuel oil, quote unquote, distillate, and you see wood. And I think that there is reporting gaps going on here.
Okay.
That's the best I could look at it, because the grays are kind of scattered all over.
They're concentrated in like
Florida.
Southern California, Florida, and it looks like Wyoming,
Yep.
Colorado area.
Yeah, but you can see them if you look carefully. You can find them everywhere.
Yeah.
They're like,
Okay.
why is that county next to like Racine County in Wisconsin? Why is that gray? I don't know the answer.
Okay.
But
I was just curious what might contribute to the fact that 10-ish years ago we were not sure what fuels were being used for market share.
I think in 2016, when this report was made, I think that they just had data gaps.
Okay.
And because having looked at it, I haven't been able to figure out. I had the same question. I don't have any other answer besides data gaps.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
No worries. So here we have the map of greenhouse gas improvements, and it varies by the grid mix in the States. But basically, even with West Virginia's 92% coal grid, it's still a net benefit to put in heat pumps, because they're just basically renewable energy collectors. They collect. If you were putting solar panels up on the roof, and you were doing electric resistance, you'd have 3 or 4 times as many solar panels up on the roof running electric resistance than if you run it with a heat pump, because the heat pump is collecting heat from the air. It's a renewable energy collector, and you can use 1/3 or 1/4 or 1/5 as much electricity that way as using a heat pump to collect the heat. So if you're collecting energy from the sun, you can do it solar electric panels, solar hot water panels, or heat pumps, which suck the heat out of the air that was heated by the sun. And that turns out to be a very efficient, compact way of collecting renewable energy. Now here, isn't this fun? I love this because you can see Florida is one of the states with the most all-electric construction. This is EIA's 2020 data, the Energy Information Administration, or feds. Hawaii, 72% all-electric construction. Florida, 77% all-electric construction. And you can see other states that are in like the 60s, like or 40 to 60s range, like Washington. What is this state? Is this Arizona? Is that what I'm looking at? What state is this?
Arizona.
It is Arizona. Good. So there is a significant amount of all electric construction, such that it's 1 in 4 homes in the United States. And in some places like Hawaii and Florida, it's 3 in 4 buildings, 3 in 4 homes.
Is that new buildings or
all buildings?
All buildings. Okay, cool.
Yeah. If you were to take the South, quote unquote, as the geographic area, roughly like to Texas, although really Arizona gets included. So California is not in the South, but everywhere else that's the South, it is about 80% all electric construction, new construction right now in the South. It is the complete,
that's awesome.
It's amazing, and it's market driven. Cannot emphasize that enough. California is trying to play catch up because in 2000 we had an energy crisis that was actually a political governance crisis. We didn't realize that we were being scammed, but it led us to lose our governor. And the Energy Commission in 2003 came out with an energy code that would never let that happen again. According to them, I've interviewed them to say, what happened? Why did you make this code that made it almost impossible to make all electric construction happen and had no consequences for gas? Burn as much gas as you want, but electricity, and that's because of the electricity crisis, energy crisis, which is just a scam. Kenneth Lay died before going to jail. Skillings went to jail and got out in 2018. That's the CEO. So that scam meant California was only doing 1% all electric construction for the last decade, whereas the South were doing it in 2015. We documented it was 60% all electric that year in 2015 when they did an interim report for this. In 2020, it was 80%. So California's got some catching up to do. Now, this is what developers say. All electric is a no-brainer because the cost of bringing gas to a building site is expensive. In our developments, all electric is less expensive to build, just as efficient or more efficient in operations, and you can't generate gas on site. But you can generate electricity with solar electric panels to lower your bills. This is my old boss. This is Danco Communities, the company that we founded. And this is our core insight, is that we could lower construction costs by building all electric. And if we added solar, we could make way more money than we could if there's any gas in the building, because we can't offset gas, but we could offset all the electricity with cheap panels and get like a 4-year payback. So that's my little trends thing. Now I'm gonna go into the techie stuff. And this can get a little boring because it's stuff. So just tell me when you got a question and we'll go from there. But the intent is to show you what's inside this commercial retrofits booklet and to empower you all to be able to do the advocacy that you're so good at, but with more information. So here is a classic variable air volume, VAV system. These boxes, these metal boxes, air blows through them. And it's varied. The variable air volume, it varies by how much this damper is closed. That's what's the variation. And this damper is controlled by a little computer. Okay, so that's variable air volume. Now, what makes the air hot and cold is a choice. Is it water, hot and cold water with the water frequently heated by gas? Or is it electric resistance coils? Because it turns out that you waste energy even with a heat pump by delivering hot water throughout the entire building during the summer when it's not being used, but that's how the systems are designed. And instead, if you just did electric resistance heaters, only when the heat is needed, that actually uses less total energy, just so you know. But variable air volumes, you can put hot and cold water in it and just replace the system as it is today. And this is an example. This is an AirMac heat pump. This is the Vancouver City Hall installation. They craned it in. And this is one of our leading engineers in the state saying, in most cases, typical heat pumps that can produce 120-degree water, which is all of them, will actually work fine in buildings with an existing gas boiler reheat system, as long as they have 2 row coils, which most buildings do. And these coils in here is what he's talking about, the 2 row coils, a very common VAV box. He's saying you can do it. You take out the gas boiler, stick in any old heat pump, and your building's gonna work just the same. Don't worry about it. So these are just what these things look like. Air to water, hot and cold. AirMac is a big brand. Climate Cool is a big brand. There's like 4 or 5 others. I'm just showing you things. You get it. It pulls air in, sucks the heat out of it, sticks it into the water. Different systems. Packaged rooftop systems. The package means that all of the heating and cooling work happens inside the box, and the only thing that leaves the box is air. So air is blown from this box into ductwork, and they're on top of all the roofs. It's like 60% of the commercial buildings in California have one of these on top of them. It just sits there making hot and cold. Currently, it'll be using gas to make heat and electricity to make the air conditioning happen. And just, in San Diego, it's about 60% of commercial buildings use heat pumps already. You have one of the highest adoption rates of heat pumps in the state. You do have the highest adoption for commercial buildings for using heat pumps, and PG&E has the worst. Okay, this is a different kind of heat pump with a different application. This one was for small commercial building, blowing air through ductwork. That's all it's supposed to do. And I wanted to point out that there's -10 Fahrenheit, -10 Fahrenheit, because many of these heat pumps are not using computers to do the work of controls. When you add a computer to a heat pump, that allows it. My analogy is like old-fashioned heat pumps are like driving a car at 70 miles an hour through the suburbs. And so you have to turn the car physically on and off. There's no brakes. You just turn it on or off. And that's how heat pumps have worked up until about 2010. They're on or they're off, 70 miles an hour. Then they started inventing 2-stage heat pumps 20, 30 years ago that could go 70 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour, nothing else. Now we've added computers since 2010 in the United States to heat pumps, and we can go 1 mile an hour, 3, 10, any amount that we want. And when we get to 70 miles an hour, we can turn it up and we can go to 150 miles an hour. And that's what computers do to heat pumps, is that these -10 models, the computer's speeding up the system inside to match the load and the temperatures outside, and it can do it at a very controlled amount. And you can go down to -10 or negative, in this case, you can see VRFs, they go down, this one's -25, Bryant, which is also Carrier, same brand. So this Bryant one, -25. This Carrier, same manufacturer, -5, -13 for York, Daikin. These variable refrigerant flows, the variable refers to the computer inside that varies its output. Refrigerant flow, what's leaving this box is not water and it's not air, it's refrigerant. So it's like skinny little pipes that take refrigerant to some fan coil box somewhere in the building. And at that place, then the heat or the cold is taken out of the refrigerant and put into the air. VRFs, as they're abbreviated, are popular, they're expensive. I don't like them personally because there's so much refrigerant involved. What they do is they heat and cool refrigerant in that box and they release it out, but then it goes to a manifold, which has an alarm and an extra pump system. And from the manifold, it then sends out more refrigerant in smaller lines throughout the building. And it's just a lot of refrigerant, which has a relatively high global warming potential. And it's expensive to keep on sending and then stopping it and holding it and pumping it and moving it around. It's just the most expensive way to deliver heating and cooling. But a lot of engineers like them. And they also work to very cold temperatures and so they're just popular. They're kind of like an early generation and they do a lot of things. They're just, there's downsides, but they're popular. Now, case study. You'd say, well, does electrifying necessarily require more power? You might have heard like, oh no, what are we going to do about the grid when we electrify space heating in the wintertime? It's going to need so much energy. Well, it turns out that the grid already is designed for peaks in the summer that are larger than the peaks we have in the winter, at least currently. And that means that you can use an air conditioner with the same power supply to get more or less the same work done in the winter. But what if you still feel like you don't have enough power? Well, you can put in efficiency. So this example is that there are 35 tons of rooftop units, RTUs. These are packaged heat pumps. I was just showing you, packaged rooftop heat pumps. 35 tons. Well, they put in, instead of that, then they put in 18 tons. This is the retrofit in the middle. And the difference is made up by putting this energy recovery ventilator, which is just blowing air, like the cold air inside the building this summer is being exhausted because it's dirty with people's breathing and such. And it's being, at the same time, hot outside air is being pulled in and it's being chilled as the cold air goes past it in a metal manifold. So that passive heating or chilling, depending upon the season, is what got rid of almost half of the heating and cooling load for the building. So they're able to downsize the amount of heat pumps that goes in, put them in energy efficiency, and there's no effect on the electrical service. And this turns out to be pretty common in big commercial buildings, is that they have old systems, 40 years old, you know, big systems. And the new stuff is so efficient, as well as like some LED lights, you know, putting in an energy recovery ventilator, which is kind of a new-ish strategy. It's so efficient, there's no new extra power needs, even though you're doubling it up and putting in space heating and perhaps domestic hot water too. Okay, and by the way, you're welcome to keep on interrupting it, like ask questions as you go along, if you have any questions. Okay, so I was trying to push into more difficult systems. I was hanging out at a conference and the guy next to me was like, hey, I had the General Services Administration for California. Oh, really? He says, yeah, my biggest challenge is prisons. We're all working on steam. I don't know how to electrify steam. Okay, let me explain how to electrify steam, how to get a steam system, because prisons in California are all running on steam, which means they literally boiled the water at 212 degrees. Now they're pushing steam around the building. And you can't ask the prisoners to move out while you replace all the infrastructure in a prison. You really need to just go to where the heat is produced and replace that. So here's how you do it. You'd get a CO2 heat pump. CO2 is the refrigerant, and CO2 goes a lot hotter than the standard refrigerants, 410A and 134A that we use in the United States currently. And every 15 and 20 years, we change refrigerants. So here we have CO2, carbon dioxide. It's products are invented in Japan, essentially. Everyone's using them in Japan. They're just finally coming to the United States because we have some of the worst energy efficiency laws in the United States, in the world, I mean to say. Of the developed nations, we suck. Everyone knows it. We have the worst standards. Our floor is such a a low floor. So here we have a CO2 heat pump, which can go from -30 Fahrenheit all the way up to 185 Fahrenheit. So -30 weather outside, super polar vortex, and you're producing 180 Fahrenheit water. That's not boiled yet. It has to go into this electric resistance steam boiler. This is like for steam systems, heating systems. And this is what you call a cascading system, or 2 lifts. One lift is happening with the Link by Watts. It's made in upstate New York. It's one of the many CO2 heat pumps, but it's our biggest one in the United States. That's 500,000 BTUs. And then that hot water at 185 goes into a steam boiler. So the last step is not efficient. It's electric resistance, 185 to 212 electric resistance, but it can still be clean energy, grid energy, but it's not efficient. But all the rest of the work up to 185 is super efficient with the CO2 heat pump at a coefficient of performance of about 3.5 is what this product works at. So it's 350% efficient. 1 unit of electricity in collects 3.5 units of heat from the environment. These are all smaller ones. This is for prisons. It's just like and steam systems. These boilers, these are for domestic hot water. They're for restaurants. They're for apartment complexes. They're for hotels and motels. They're for things that you put a bunch of hot water into, not offices, which office buildings usually they barely need water heaters. Just put a little electric resistance underneath a sink. That's all an office needs because there's no showering. But anything that's got significant hot water, you can see that there's lots of different brands and different sizes and different designs. Okay, now I like this. This is the Tamarack Club Slope Side Hotel in Ellicottville, New York. In 2011, they replaced the propane water heaters for heat pumps. And you can see this is AquaCal's heat pumps up here on the right side. They have a cold climate one for raising the temperature up to about 80 degrees Fahrenheit in the swimming pool in the wintertime. And then they use a water source heat pump. It just concentrates heat. Like it takes the 80 Fahrenheit and it raises it up to the 110 that the hot tubs need that are next to the swimming pools. So really what's happening is all the heat is getting dumped into the swimming pool, and then in a controlled, predicted, everything works right, balanced way, they pull the heat out of the swimming pool and into the hot tubs. Swimming pool stays 80 degrees Fahrenheit, but the hot tubs go up to 110. And that's how you can just ski up to your hot tub in upstate New York, is with these heat pumps. And this cut their bills by 50%. In most of the country, heat pumps lower bills. San Diego having some of the highest electricity rates in the United States. It's going to be a little bit harder unless you add solar panels, and then it's definitely cheaper to run heat pumps, is use your electricity, get the efficiency out of the heat pump, and add a little bit of solar panels to get the really low cost electricity, just so you know. But other than just add a little solar, you have solutions in San Diego for everything. Left-hand side is a beautiful swimming pool where a lot of state champions have come from in Hawaii. The Olympic-sized pool with a big bopper. Up here on the right-hand side, the big bopper from AquaCal out of Florida. And here on the right-hand side is a Florida swimming pool. This is one of those beachside resorts, and they replaced the gas boilers for their lazy river with a heat pump with a big bopper, and their bills dropped in half. That's a common thing, half as expensive than running it on propane as running on heat pumps. Buses. I spent a lot of years on stinky buses going from my farm in Wisconsin to the school. And they smelled bad. They smelled just like diesel inside the buses. So here we have all these nice electric buses. You see all the firms on the left-hand side making them: Lion, Bird, Bluebird, BYD, etc. And these chargers here, that's one version. I wanted to point out the next version. These are just charging the buses. This Nube here, this is a bus charger, but it also charges the school from the bus. And each bus has the same amount of electricity stored in its battery as 10 Tesla Powerwalls. Powerwalls 13 kilowatt hours. Buses are 100 to 150 kilowatt hours. So we call it average, about 130 for the average school bus you'd find out there on the road. It's electric. So it's 10 Tesla Powerwalls. On the left-hand side, you can see this is a kid who's been evacuated from the Paradise Fire in 2018 to a school. And that what I'm trying to pair here is that these electric school buses can become microgrid sources for resiliency for emergencies. You can run schools off of the bus fleet for days, if not weeks. These are big batteries. If you just don't drive them around, you're good. And if you do need to power up a school, you can drive the bus to where there's power, power it up and bring the battery back. And this innovation is like the way that people in Japan survived the tsunami in 2011, which shut down a third of the power plants in the country. They started plugging in Nissan Leafs. Again, in Japan in 2019, there was a typhoon that knocked out power to 3 million people. And Nissan started letting everyone drive over to their car sales places, charge up the cars and take them home to charge their homes in that power outage zone. So this is a tried and true resiliency emergency survival method. Take the local electric vehicle, which has got a huge battery in it, and use it to power the building. Way more power in it than you would normally buy from any stationary batteries that you put on a wall. No one puts 10 Tesla Powerwalls on their wall. People buy a Tesla all the time, which has the same amount of power. Or like I have a Volkswagen e-Golf.
Just listening to this thing about heat pumps. It's really interesting.
Heat pump. Yeah, I just read article about it. Paper.
So anyway, this is electrifying commercial buildings. Think about using the vehicles as backup power. I also want to lean in on restaurants. This is a nice academy. It's brand new. It's all electric. Of course, everyone in Europe has been learning on electric forever because induction is a far superior cooking strategy compared to gas in terms of control, speed, twice as fast, way less dangerous, way less pollution. And I have a huge catalog of products. I'm just showing you a couple little samples to say like, look, there's a lot of griddles. You want to boil bagels in a kettle? Go for it. There's a lot of bagel kettles. Dome pizza ovens, you bet. You want a high temperature 800 to 1000 degree oven so you can really cook your pizza right? You bet. Bunches of them that are electric. Are you a Pakistani immigrant who would like to start serving restaurant food from your home country? Go ahead and get a tandoor oven from Beach. Instead of having charcoal down in the base of it and cooking the roti bread on the sides of it, just heat the sides of it and don't even start a fire down there, or put a little bit down there to smoke if you want the flavor of the smoke on the bread. But they've made an electric tandoor oven and everything else with one exception. We don't currently have a chow wok, which is the big woks. We only have bao woks. Bao is like a 5 kW wok. We need a 15 kW wok. We need about 5 times as much energy going into it. So you can do the way that you'd find in like a Thai restaurant or an Indian restaurant or a Chinese dumpling restaurant. They use big woks, and we don't have those in induction. I'm not clear if we have an electric resistance either, but of all of the ethnic food out there, it's just the really big woks that we lack. And you're seeing smaller woks all over the country that are commercial restaurant woks, but they're for smaller dishes, 1 to 2 dishes. And yeah, that's the upshot of it. But everything else is available. And then I showed you these electric fireplaces, and I mentioned that Dimplex makes the Optimist, spelled OPTIMYST, Optimist. A Firewater is another manufacturer of them. They're really cool. This is As Seen on Bar Rescue, season 7, episode 3. They take a dive bar and they turn it into a fancy bar in part by putting up this fake wall. Note that these mist fireplaces have no pollution and you can put them anywhere. Like this is not making any pollution. It doesn't even mist up my windows. It hardly makes any moisture. But it's one of these things where you can add drama and flair to a space and make new spaces with these fireplaces and have no venting requirements, no gas delivery. They're 120 volt. You can plug them into any old outlet. And I think this is my last slide. I wanted to show, this is commercial oriented and the booklet itself is around commerce. So one of the hard things when you're doing construction of new sites is getting site. Jose, are you asking something? Your voice is really choppy. Jose, you might want to write that into the chat because I can't understand what you're saying. Okay. And this Kelly Linden, you noted that Nuve is a San Diego company. Yeah, buy local, right? Rachel G said this is so cool using buses as power banks. Uh-huh. NCCCA event can be found here. Okay. Recovery is one of my favorite forms of efficiency from Shane. Yep, Shane, exactly. It's right there. Why waste? Carl says we do have roughly half the solar power in the winter. That's because you're in San Diego, right? Got good energy there. And Jose asks, do the fireplaces emit infrared so that they feel warm? Yes and no. So the way I have mine set up right now, it has halogen bulbs in it, not LEDs like most of them do, but this one comes with halogens. So it's a tiny bit warm, not like hot, just warm. So much so that like in the wintertime, my kids will come in and they'll put their hands in the fire to kind of warm their fingers up a little bit on a cold winter day. But it comes with an electric resistance heater plug and a customized electric resistance heater so that it blows heat. I just didn't want it. Like I didn't want to buy an extra $500 heater because I have all sorts of electric heaters around because I buy them to play with them. And I've been thinking maybe I should get it just so I can tell everyone how it works. That's why I bought this one. It's like, hey, Miss Fireplaces, they're awesome, but someone should actually have one and be able to advocate. So yes, it is designed to heat this room. No, I don't have it set up that way. But yes, for all y'all, this thing would be a plug into the wall and it put out about as much heat as you'd be getting from a wall heater. So it's about up to 1500 watts of heating. And in turn, that would warm up the room that you're in, toasty warm. So construction power. Sorry, it is hard to get construction power on a site when you want it. PG&E, SDG&E, et cetera, they're slow to deliver a temporary line to a temporary pole for you then to use electricity to build on. And so people end up having noisy, polluting, dangerous generators, or they end up using gas-powered equipment, a variety of things. This truck comes with 11 plugs that are 110 volt, a 240 volt plug so you can run things like compressors and power washers and things like that. And the 130 kilowatt hour battery that it has in the extended pack one, it's like 99 kilowatt hours for normal, 130 for extended pack. That's days and days of power, even if you didn't go home and charge it up at night. Basically, this thing is you can build a house. If you had a couple of trucks there, you could be powering a really large construction site. It is a big battery in these trucks, way bigger than almost any other battery you see delivered. Even construction site batteries, which is a thing, a mobile construction site battery, are not as big as these truck batteries. So this is the way to go. Like you're a construction worker, get an F-150 and you've got the power. Okay, so that was my last slide. And Rachel, I'm so glad you're feeling inspired because it is pretty exciting that we can do it, you know? Carl, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, Sean, you mentioned with VFRs that the refrigerants we have in them kind of suck right now. And so you're not a super big fan of a manifold system. Would that change with a CO2 system? Because it feels like VFR, even in a big commercial experience, would still be best efficiency if we could use the manifold system safely. Is that fair?
Well, CO2 you can't set up a VRF with CO2 because CO2 can't leave the box. The CO2 only works at extremely high pressures. So if you were doing a field installation to deliver CO2 to some other part of the building, it would pop. You wouldn't be able to accomplish it. But they make VRFs, quote unquote, now that deliver water. So, which isn't really importantly different from this. This is a variable refrigerant flow heat pump that delivers water, but they've been trying to push this idea is like, no, it's like a VRF. We're going to deliver really hot water to a manifold, and then we're going to have pumps that go from it. And then so they're trying to use the sophistication of having a whole bunch of water go to a manifold as the sort of the step up, because people recognize that VRFs, the amount of refrigerant that's going through the building is polluting and not easy to build for and things like that. So yes, you could have a CO2 VRF, and in some ways, the link by Watts one, where'd that go? There. this would sort of count as that. Like it's a CO2 thing, and it releases super hot water or super cold water, and then you can do the things you need to do with it, but you still get to use CO2 as a refrigerant.
Yeah. So, Sean, I really want to thank you. I'm sorry I might have to cut off any other questions there are in the interest of time, but I really want to thank you for a really informative and, as somebody said, very stimulating presentation.
I am so glad you enjoyed it. I am so appreciative of your guys' leadership down there. Like San Diego, you're doing a fantastic job. 10th largest city in the country. You know, rock on.
Well, we're really delighted that you're also part of our conversations and provide us morsels of information as well. So thank you very much.